and happy Friday. Today is my 24th birthday, so let's hang out, make some art, and talk about some YouTube drama. And today we're talking about Ryland Adams and his podcast. So in October of last year, Ryland Adams started his podcast called The Sip with his co-host Lizze Gordon. The podcast started out as a tea podcast where Ryland and Lizze would talk about internet drama and have interviews with big names in the YouTube creator space like Trisha Paytas and Jeffree Star, which sparked a ton of drama on its own, leading to Ryland being the center of topics that needed to be discussed on the podcast. How this all changed the genre of The Sip and affected the relationships of everybody involved, including the relationship between Lizze and Ryland as co-hosts, the reason behind declining views, and how public opinion has shifted negatively is a topic that I wanted to dive into today, especially with the recent comments Ryland has been addressing and reacting to lately. And as we hang out and talk about this lighthearted drama on the internet, I will be working on this caricature illustration of Ryland here on the screen, and as always, I would like to invite my fellow artists to grab a sketchbook or a drawing tablet and make some art with me while we talk about it, and at the end of the video, I will be sharing some of the art that you guys worked on during my previous videos, so stay tuned for that. And if you like this relaxed atmosphere, I'd love for you guys to give this video a thumbs up and perhaps even subscribe if you feel like it, and links to all my social media will be in the description if you would like to participate in sending me your art, or if you just want to see more of what I have to say for some reason. Alright, so about a week ago, I posted a video about Ryland's sister, Morgan Adams, and I looked into the reasons why her YouTube channel seems to be declining in terms of subscribers, viewers, and overall public opinion about her. That video will be linked below as well, but now let's look into Ryland's career as a podcaster. In the beginning, Ryland and Lizze's podcast, The Sip, was ranking very well in terms of views and like-dislike ratio. Most of the early podcast episodes were averaging about 500,000 views per episode on YouTube, with some episodes even reaching 1 million. As mentioned earlier, many of these videos discussed internet drama and also debuted Trisha Paytas and Jeffree Star as famous guests, and these podcasts seemed to be very well received amongst the viewers, especially in the beginning. Eventually, though, Ryland found himself in some of his own drama because of the guests that he had on the show. As many of us know, Trisha and Jeffree are not on good terms with each other. In fact, Trisha has pretty much expressed that they hate Jeffree and has had many colorful ways of describing his character. Just to really quickly recap, this feud between Trisha and Jeffree negatively affected the relationship Trisha had with Shane Dawson and Ryland Adams. Jeffree Star betrayed Trisha on multiple occasions and treated them very poorly, but Shane and Ryland never defended Trisha. Even after Trisha expressed their feelings toward Jeffree to their best friend at the time, Shane, and also Ryland still went ahead and gave Jeffree a platform on his podcast, which ended up being one of the last straws for Trisha. There's obviously a lot more detail to that situation, which I skipped for basically time purposes and because this video is not about that, but I did cover it on my channel early on if you want to go back and watch it, or else there's probably a lot of other people who explained it way better than I ever could have. But I'm sure most of you know what happened because it was like a big drama a while ago. And ultimately, this drama put Ryland in a really awkward situation as the face of his podcast. Since Shane is still mostly offline, Ryland had to be the one to address the issue publicly, since a lot of the drama did start because of the podcast and who he had on as guests. And this was truly the turning point that began the downfall of The Sip. After the friendship breakup between Trisha, Shane, and Ryland took a few minutes on his next podcast to talk about his feelings about the situation. In summary, Ryland basically said that he had no idea Trisha felt the way they did, and that he wishes Trisha would have just told him instead of expecting him to read their mind. He said he in no way supports the hurt that Trisha had been put through by Jeffree, and reminded the audience that these are two separate friends who had separate issues with each other that he was not involved in. Lizze, however, was the only person to actually say the words "I'm sorry" to Trisha and expressed her sympathy for what Trisha went through. I am definitely Team Trisha for that situation, although I can see how both sides could be accepted by different groups of people. Ultimately, though, I do think Shane and Ryland should have been more supportive of Trisha and more defensive of Trisha, but instead they wanted to stay neutral, and in my opinion, to keep it a good relationship with Jeffree Star. I definitely think that this was business related, which must have made the decision for Shane and Ryland pretty much to stand by a lot easier for them to make, as sad as that sounds. After that, Ryland decided to rebrand the whole podcast to be less about drama and tea and just be more kind of a more casual conversation, kind of like what I'm trying to do here, I guess. This decision was made because Ryland ended up becoming the hot topics that needed to be discussed on the internet, but Ryland didn't want to talk about his own drama on his podcast. In general, Ryland felt like there was just too much attraction to negativity in general and wanted to take a step away from that for his own personal mental health. And that was definitely a turning point for the podcast's ratings. From that situation, comments were actually shut off on a handful of the videos that came out after that, and when comments were turned back on, certain keywords like Trisha and Jeffree were blocked from the other videos. Although comments and filters were leading to most of the comments appearing to be positive on the following podcast episodes, the like to dislike ratio compared to the earlier episodes was very poor. Also, the views began to decline from averages we were seeing earlier on, about 500,000, and now they were hitting averages at about 100,000. That's still a really good view average, though, from like an outsider perspective. Like from my perspective, that's still really good views. But compared to the numbers that they used to get and compared to the numbers other podcasts from similar sized creators are getting, the average views definitely took a dive. So now that we've recapped the downfall of Ryland's podcast and we are pretty much caught up to the present day now, let's take a look at some of the recent drama the SIP has found itself in, including Ryland's quote-unquote drama with co-host Lizze, and what people are currently saying about Ryland as a podcast host. Ryland has definitely been the topic of a ton of recent drama and commentary videos these past few weeks, due to the apparent tension he has with Lizze, and the way he seems to treat her as a co-host, and the way Ryland addresses his fans in the comments. There's a lot. This all seemed to have started because of a recent episode of The SIP, where Lizze expressed her excitement for a movie that she was in that was ranking high on iTunes. Lizze seemed to have like kind of a really cute comedic attitude towards this, since she was only in a couple of seconds of one scene, but she was excited nonetheless, and Lizze wanted to share her excitement with Ryland and the audience by showing the movie clip on the podcast. But Ryland seemed to brush it off by saying that it would take a lot of production to show the clip, and he seemed generally annoyed by the request. They did end up sharing the clip, and Ryland again noted that she was only on screen for a few seconds and she didn't even help write or produce the film, as if that matters, but fans and viewers took this as like a thick tension between Ryland and Lizze, and viewers expressed their opinions online about Ryland's seemingly condescending tone and reaction. A lot of people seemed to share the opinion that they don't think the podcast will last much longer, since Lizze is outshining Ryland and she should move on to something bigger and better soon. People think Ryland is envious of Lizze and how likable she is among the SIP viewers, which is apparently the source of his passive-aggressive behavior toward her and her successes in some people's view. I've also seen a lot of people online express that they wish Lizze would break off the SIP and do her own podcast. I've also seen people wanting her to join the H3 podcast, which I don't think would ever happen personally, but the reason why people want her to do her own thing is because they only watch the SIP because of Lizze, and they don't want to see Ryland on their screens anymore. She is definitely beloved by ex-Shane and Ryland fans, and people think that it's affecting her relationship with Ryland, who still hasn't recovered from his past drama with Shane and Trisha and Jeffree and all of that. Now, more recently, Ryland has found himself in more YouTube drama headlines again for addressing negative comments about himself and the podcast. A few podcast episodes ago, Ryland and Lizze posted their first podcast that went over an hour long. The SIP fans were happy about the longer length of the video, and they expressed that in the comments, but Ryland took the comments the wrong way. During an episode of the SIP, Ryland expressed to Lizze that he was upset about the comments from the previous podcast, and Lizze genuinely seemed confused as to why that may be. Ryland then told Lizze that the comments were all saying, "Finally a podcast not cut down to nothing," which he summarized in a mocking tone and said that there was an aggression in the original tone of the comments. Lizze told Ryland that she thinks he was kind of creating the aggression in his own interpretation, but he said that he wishes people could have just said, "I'm so appreciative for the hour-long podcast." And Lizze reiterated that she thinks this should be looked at as a positive since people wanted to hear them talk for longer. So again, I can definitely see both sides here, and I think it's easy for any person to accidentally misunderstand the tone of a comment. I definitely have done that myself, but I stood corrected after leaving a response and finding out what the original comment actually meant, and I apologized, and I'm still learning, but I think it's easy for anybody to take personal offense to comments, especially when the comments are coming from internet strangers, and most comments don't come with tone indicators or anything like that. And I think the way we interpret comments has to do with our overall mood as well as we're reading them. So if I was already in a bad mood and having a bad time and I saw a comment that seemed rude or aggressive, I would probably be way more likely to leave a sassy response or let the comment further affect my mood in my day. Whereas if I was in a great mood when I saw the comment, I'd probably laugh it off and just forget it ever happened. I do, however, think there's definitely room to criticize how Ryland publicly responded to these comments. And I think the high-pitched mocking tone of voice was definitely unnecessary for sure. And I think it would have been best for him just to not bring it up at all on the show and maybe just talk about how he feels with the people in his real life if it actually did bother him to that extent. After all, we are all human and we all do have human reactions. And I think we just witnessed Ryland having a totally acceptable human reaction to something that was bothering him. And I think it's valid that Ryland was feeling upset by some of these comments. But again, I think we should be able to criticize the way he handled it. I think a lot of people are being a little bit too mean, though, to Ryland about this specific drama. Let's criticize the way that he may talk down to Lizze, or let's criticize the amount of times he interrupts her. Let's criticize him for the way he handled his friendship with Trisha and Jeffrey. But let's not be so nasty about this if we can help it. I'm very against black and white thinking, and I don't think the idea of someone being all bad all the time or someone being all good all the time is a good way to look at things. I think we can take each person and each situation individually as they are and judge based on that alone. And I personally don't agree with a lot of the low blow comments that I've been seeing under this podcast from people saying that they can't stand Ryland's voice, people laughing at his insecurities, since we all have insecurities, and people going after his appearance even, and other physical traits that he physically can't change. Again, I truly think this could have been handled better and probably shouldn't have been online at all. Ryland shouldn't have used a mocking tone to represent his audience for sure, but I don't think this specific situation warrants the overwhelming amount of vile comments about Ryland's character, insecurities, and voice and looks that are all being left under his podcast comments. It's just all so mean and so negative, and I think we could definitely do less with the black and white. This person is so bad that everything they do is bad, and let's say the meanest things, and he deserves the worst punishment kind of attitude toward creators on the internet. I feel like if you don't like a creator, then you just shouldn't watch them or engage with them unless there's like an actual serious problem that needs to be addressed. Again, criticism of someone's actions and behaviors is good, but hate is not, and let's not be hateful people. It's definitely hard seeing all the hate online, and it seems like the majority of the internet can be hateful at times, but I think in real life and in real human experience and real human-to-human interactions, we all do similar trivial things that we tear creators apart for on the internet. Like complaining about likes and comments on social media. I'm sure we've all done that at some point. But in real life, we have patience for each other when we're talking about this to each other. And we have patience for each other to learn and grow without being hateful. And ideally, I'd like to see more of this on the internet too. And as a related reminder, my channel did start off as a stereotypical drama channel, which did attract a ton of negativity that I was not comfortable with hosting. And that's why I kind of rebranded in a way where instead of breaking internet tea all the time and being the first to report on a story, I wanted to just create a safe, creative space for us to just all hang out like friends and talk about internet drama without being hateful. And that's one of the reasons why my logo has the words "not tea." While we're talking about the internet drama, I don't want to host a space for negativity. I like drama when it's fun and lighthearted, and we can talk about it without being hateful toward anybody involved. I want it to be like how I talk about YouTube drama in real life with my mom and my sister, but online with you guys as well. So I hope that's the kind of environment that I'm creating here, and if you agree with me and you like that idea, I would like to have you subscribe if you want, if you haven't already. And with that, here is some of the artwork that my viewers have made during my previous videos, and I'd love for you to share yours with me on Twitter or Instagram, which is linked in my description. And I also have a Patreon where I send my supporters stickers and handwritten thank you cards in the mail, and I also have an archive of downloadable coloring pages that everybody on Patreon has access to. That could be fun for some people to maybe work on while they listen to my videos if they want. And links to everything that I just mentioned is in the description as always. And with that, I hope you enjoyed hanging out and maybe making some artwork with me. And if you're not an artist, I hope you're able to express creativity in other ways. Thank you so much for watching and stay creative. See you next time.